way it is going to be available for everybody. So welcome everybody. This is our first PCI version 4 webinar that we're doing, and we are going to elaborate on the new changes to PCI version 4. And if you are new to PCI, we will give a little background to what PCI is, and this is mainly for organizations that have to stay in compliance with PCI. What are the requirements, and what strategy can they come up with going into PCI version 4 transition? So you are welcome. Let's begin. So this webinar is organized by Eretmis Inc., a PCI QSA company based in New York, and I'm going to be the instructor for, or I'm going to be the facilitator for this program. I'm Dr. Emmanuel Edu. I'm the CEO of Eretmis Inc., the QSA company, and I'm a QSA myself. I'm the founder of Eretmis Academy as well. So without wasting much time, we will jump into the topics that we are going to touch on for tonight. And we will be looking at what PCI DSS version 4 is, the difference between PCI DSS version 3.2.1 and version 4. And then also we will look at the timeline by which organizations will have to stay in compliance with, or will have to transition into the PCI version 4 fully, right? Now, as of now, version 3.2.1 is still being used, and version 4 is also going alongside. We will look at all that. And what does that mean for your organization if your organization has to stay in compliance with PCI? And we also look at how to prepare for the transition, right? How to prepare for version 4, and how to develop a strategic plan or approach to transitioning from version 3.2.1 to version 4. Okay, so it's going to be a fun ride. So everybody should sit tight, and there's a lot to cover in this session, and there is going to be a subsequent session, because especially when it comes to the changes, today we are going to do a high-level overview of the changes. In our next session, we are going to go a little bit more in depth into it, not going too much into details, because when we go too much into details and being too technical, we can lose some people in that route, right? So we are looking at it from a holistic approach that everybody will be able to understand and know exactly what is going on. So if you find yourself in an organization, or if your organization has to stay in compliance, you know exactly where to find what information, and also you can always approach Eretmis for any assistance. So we will begin with what is PCI DSS version 4. So version 4 came up not too long ago, March, April 2021, right? But talks about it started around late 2020, early 2020. So we were going back and forth on it, anticipating how it was going to be, and they kept sending drafts upon drafts to industry players like myself and Eretmis Inc. And some comments and stuff were sent by almost everybody within the industry. But before we get into what version 4.0 is, we first have to kind of lay the background. So we'll look at what PCI DSS is, right? So if you are new to PCI DSS, PCI DSS is a set of security standards, right? In cybersecurity, there are what we call frameworks. So PCI DSS is one of the frameworks, and what these frameworks, why we have them and how we use them is that frameworks, they list a best practices through the lens of whatever data or whatever that we wish to achieve. In PCI DSS, the main goal is to protect credit card and debit card information, right? So when you purchase something with your card, you can be rest assured that the organization receiving your card is going to keep it in a safe way. That way attackers or bad people don't get their hands on your credit card and use it elsewhere, right? May almost everybody here might have experienced this one way or the other. Look at the trouble that you have to go through to call your bank, to, you know, cancel your card. A new card will be sent to you. And if you had the card already on file for some, maybe for some bills, when you get the card, you might forget to go back and change it if you have something set on auto pay. So all that, you know, hassle, and also your money being spent and going back and forth with the bank to get your money back, all that is, you know, something that can be avoided if card accepting companies, if they follow PCI DSS, right? So PCI DSS, the full meaning of it is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, and this standard is set forth by PCI SSC, which we call the PCI Council. They are the ones who come up with these standards. And these standards, when it was originally made, somewhere September 2026, September 2006, we've gone through different versions of it, and now we are at version 4.0. So we will look at that whole like transition, or we'll go back in time and look at where it started and how far we've come, right? So most of you might even not know from version 1.1 to version 4, there are a whole lot of versions in between, right? So the goal behind PCI DSS as a standard is to help protect credit card and debit card information of consumers or, you know, card holders. So this is not nice to have. Organizations that accept credit card, debit card, and process, store, or transmit these card holder data, they have to stay in compliance with PCI DSS, right? So it's not one of those frameworks that you can choose to comply or not. So this, they have to. And as different versions are coming up, they have to put in place a strategy to help them meet those new standards as well, right? So that is the background for PCI DSS if you are totally new to PCI DSS. So now let's go to the versions of PCI DSS so far, right? So PCI DSS started with version 1.1. That was in September 2006. And September 2006, around that time, around 2006 was when the PCI Council was formed by the major card brands, including Visa, Master, American Express, Discover, JCB, right? They are the card companies that came together to form PCI Council, and PCI Council comes up with the standards, right? So the first standard was version 1.1, which was in 2006, and version 1.2 was made in 2008, October of 2008, and this version was an improvement upon version 1.1, obviously. And then we had version 1.2.1, which also came about in August of 2009. And then version 2 also came about in October of 2010, right? And as we are moving down the versions, right, it is getting better and better, and it is addressing, you know, threats, and it is adapting to the technological landscape as well, right? So we move on to version 3, right? Version 3 came about in 2013, November of 2013, and version 3.1 came up in April 2015, and version 3.2 in 2016. And the current version that we have, not talking about version 4, but the current one before version 4 came about, was version 3.2.1, which was released in May of 2018, right? So all these versions, they address specific areas of security, and they are always an improvement on the previous version, right? So now we have version 4, which is going alongside version 3.2.1, right? So both of them are going to run for 2 years, and then version 3.2.1 will be retired. Now it is going to be left with only version 4, right? So if there's not necessarily a change every maybe 2-3 years, but depending on the change in technology and depending on the change in threats and vulnerabilities in cybersecurity, that calls for change in this standard, right? So version 4 did a really good job of addressing current technological advancement in terms of virtualization and cloud, and then also some of the wording and other issues that was in version 3.2.1 has been addressed, right? And there is also a new approach to version 4, and we will talk about that as we move along, which makes it pretty fun. So version 4 is the latest version of PCI DSS. We've looked at previous versions. So version 4 is the new kid on the block, and version 4 supersedes all other versions, right? But as of now, version 3.2.1 is still in existence. It's going to go, side by side with version 4 up to March of next year, right? So up to March of 2024, version 3.2.1 will still be valid, and most organizations will still be staying in compliance with that. And that is what assessors are also going to use, unless, of course, an organization choose to, follow version 4, then version 4 will be used for your assessment, okay? So assessment is simply audits. So every organization that has to stay in compliance with PCI, they have to subject themselves to an audit annually, right? So we are not going to go too much into the details of what type of assessment that they have to do. But if your organization accepts credit card, debit card, and they transmit, process, or store these credit cards, then they have to stay in compliance. Now, if your organization outsources that aspect of business to a third-party company, then you don't have to be the one going through the assessment, but you have the responsibility of making sure the third-party organization stays in compliance with PCI, right? So either way, you still have a responsibility and you still have a part to play. I'm talking about the companies. So version 4 is the latest version, and we will look at the goals. There are 4 main goals that version 4 seeks to address, right? The first one is to promote security as a continuous process. And we normally call this business as usual, right? So security shouldn't be like a point in time event. Most organizations are treating PCI DSS and security itself when it comes to compliance. They are treating it as a one-time event in the year. So if they have to do an assessment or there's going to be an audit, that is where everybody is, rushing and running to help pass the audits. And once the audit is done, everybody goes back to sleep. Now, version 4 seeks to stop that act, right? So version 4, one of the underlying factors of version 4 is continuous. PCI should be treated as a continuous process, not a one-time process. So the next goal is to enhance validation methods and procedures. Now we will get more into that as we look at the specific changes from version 3.2 to version 4.0, right? And the next is to add flexibility to support different methodologies being used to achieve security. Now we will talk about that also as well as we move along, right? So, and then also the last one is to ensure that the standard continues to meet all necessary security needs of the industry or of the payments industry, right? And the best practices that are outlined in version 3.2.1 has been improved upon in version 4, right? But the 4 main goals of version 4 is what I've outlined, and we are going to, dive deep into them and talk about the different areas as we move along, right? So what is the difference, the main difference between version 3.2.1 and version 4? So the change type, there are 3 main change types when it comes to the 2 different versions, right? So the changes that were made in version 4, they can be categorized into 3 main change types. So the first one is evolving requirements. So evolving requirements seeks to address emerging technology threats and vulnerabilities that are out there. So changes in technological advancements is what evolving requirements seeks to address, right? So within version 3.2.1, it was made in 2018. From 2018 till let's say 2020, when they started working on version 4, a lot, for technology, even 6 months or even 3 months is almost like 5 years, right? A lot can change within a week or a day. So if you want your standard to stay relevant and to be able to address security and help protect credit card information, then obviously there has to be some changes to it, right? So version 3.2.1, what it was lacking a lot when it comes to cloud security or the cloud itself, because at the time that it was being made around 2016 to 15 to 18, cloud wasn't that big, right? So now version 4 addresses everything cloud. So some of the changes that we will label under evolving requirements is an example of what I just gave, right? So evolving requirements seeks to address technological advancements and changes in technology in the world, right? And then we have the next change type, that is guidance and clarification. So version 3.2.1, anybody who used it and who knew, what they were doing, you could easily identify some, issues with wording and explanation, right? There are some, not to bore, everybody who is not very familiar with this, but there are some areas that the wording wasn't really clear, right? Some were a bit ambiguous. You wouldn't know if you had to go left or right. An example, some places where cardholder data and account data, were not used well. Account data covers cardholder data and more, right? And sensitive authentication data. Now, cardholder data is just cardholder data minus sensitive authentication data, right? So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but when we talk about account data, it covers everything within like every data when we are referring to your credit card and debit card information, right? Account data refer to a part of your credit card or debit card data, right? So those were some of the changes that were made to address everything holistically. So those are some of the examples of clarification and guidance, right? So with clarification, now they change the wording in some of the requirements and sub-requirements. And then also when it comes to instructions and like explanation for how to implement some of these requirements, now they've set it as guidance instead of, because first, previously some QSAs were using that kind of as a set in stone instruction for companies, but now they've really clarified that it's guidance. So you can follow it, but it shouldn't be set in stone, right? So that is an aspect that the new version, which is 4.0, seeks to address, right? And the last change type is structure and format. So the 12 requirements and the 6 goals within PCI, they still remain the same. Yes, some changes in wording, but as numbers 6 and 12, they remain the same. Now the structure, when it comes to the numbering, right? So if we have 1.1.2 in version 3, now that has probably been shifted or changed to 1.5 in version 4. So that is what we mean by the structure and the format, right? So reorganization of the requirements has also been done, and renumbering has also been done. And that is what the structure and format aspect of the change seeks to address, right? So there are 3 main change types, and that is what we've talked about, okay? So now let's look at, we are diving a bit deeper into some of these changes. Now with all frameworks within cybersecurity, they are a set of best practices that organizations will have to follow. Now, specifically PCI DSS, all the versions from version 1.1 to version 3.2.1, right? Everything that was in there as a requirement, organizations, they had no option but to follow, right? They were what we call the defined approach. So if the requirement stated that you are supposed to implement a multi-factor authentication, you did just that, right? If you couldn't meet it, then you have to put in place what we call compensating controls, right? Now with this new version, it is more flexible. So when we're looking at the goals for version 4.0, we're talking about flexibility. It is more flexible, and how, are we going to go about the flexibility? So are we at liberty not to follow stated requirements, or we can do whatever we want? And that is really not the point. The flexibility here is that now, instead of just the defined approach where we are going down the list and doing exactly what we've been told, there is another option, right? That is called customized approach. So with a customized approach, instead of so you can choose to, now we have the customized approach and we have the defined approach. So the defined approach is the traditional like the traditional list of requirements that has been, with version 1.1 up to version 3.2.1, right? Now with the customized approach and the defined approach, so with this new version, we have the customized approach. With the customized approach, the organization can choose their own system that they want to use to prove that they are, practicing, or they are in a good standard when it comes to PCI. So what do I mean by this? Instead of following, a requirement, an example, implement a multi-factor authentication, an organization can choose to use a customized approach whereby they are not going to do that. They are going to do something else that equally provides the same level of security or even more security. I hope that makes sense. Right. So if a defined approach was that you have to lay maybe 5 bricks in this certain way, and if you take the customized approach, you don't have to follow the procedure that they've listed for you. That at the end of the day, you can take your own way and still lay the 5 bricks. I hope that makes sense. So that is the customized approach. Now with a customized approach, it is the organization that will set how it is going to stay in compliance with the requirements, right? So they are going to set their own standard, not necessarily set their own standard, but that standard will meet the intent of the original defined approach, right? And the QSA will have to review whatever measures that they put in place to verify that it is indeed still meeting the intent of the defined approach, right? It gets a little bit complicated, in there, but the customized approach is not for every organization. It's for organizations that are very matured when it comes to security, right? So organizations with a very matured risk-based security in place, they are the ones who can choose the customized approach, right? If your organization is still struggling with security, you are better off just going with the defined approach. And the defined approach is more simple and easy to follow. The customized approach, you have to come up with your own terms, and the QSA will also have to learn what you are doing, and based on their judgment, give you a go or no go, right? Now you can't use both. So you either have to use the defined approach or customized approach. And then also, if you fail to meet the defined approach, right, that is not the time for you to say, okay, I have an alibi, I want to use the customized approach. It doesn't work that way. So you are either using the customized approach or you are using the defined approach. Now, if an organization has a business justification for not being able to meet the customized approach, they have to, for not able to meet the defined approach. So an example, you have to implement maybe for your password, for passwords. So this is one good example that is in the requirements. The old requirements had the minimum password length to be 7 characters, right? This new one, I think, is 12. Has done to be corrected, but I think it's 12. But I personally think it should be 16, right? So with the 12, so let's say you are using like a legacy system, an old, computer or an old system that does not support a password of 12 characters. And now we are implementing the new PCI version 4. So the requirements state that you are supposed to implement a password that is 12 characters. Now, we have a business justification because our systems cannot support that. So in this situation, we have to put in place what we call compensating controls. So although we couldn't meet the original intent, we have other ways to prove that we are still protecting our system and we are meeting the intent of the original approach, or like the original requirements. Now, in this situation, we cannot say, because we are not meeting the defined approach, we want to use a customized approach, right? So if we are using customized approach, you are using customized. If you are using defined, you are using defined. Now, if you don't meet defined, the next step is to do compensating controls, right? Not to switch to customized approach. We can get a bit confusing, and I don't want us to get too technical in that aspect. But the major difference between version 3.2.1 and version 4 is the approach to implementation and validation, right? So the approach to implementation and validation, there are two approaches. For all other PCI versions, PCI DSS versions, there was only one approach, which was the defined approach, right? So at least if you don't take anything away from today's meeting, that should be something that you know, that at least version 4 has two approaches to validation and implementation, and all the other versions, which version 3.2.1 has only one, right? So now with the goals, PCI DSS goals and requirements, there is no change, right? In terms of the numbers, they are still the same. So we still have the 6 goals and we still have the 12 requirements, right? Those didn't change. Now, when it comes to wording, there are some, changes in words. With the 6 goals, I think the only change is they change cardholder data to account data, right? That is the big change. For the 12 requirements and all their sub requirements, there are, a few changes, when it comes to wording, and then also the numbering has also been changed. Okay, so, but aside that, we still have 6 goals, we still have 12 requirements in PCI DSS. Okay. Now, another big change, because we are using customized approach and defined approach in version 4, one of the big changes is what we call targeted risk analysis. So targeted risk analysis is for the customized approach, right? So for customized approach, we have to do targeted risk analysis, meaning that whatever measure that the organization wants to put in place to meet the original intent of the defined approach, they have to do a risk assessment on it. So that is what we call the targeted risk analysis, right? And then also one big change is roles and responsibilities. And what do we mean by this? All previous versions of PCI DSS, they didn't necessarily assign roles and responsibilities, and didn't even necessarily address roles and responsibilities. So within the organization, who is supposed to really do what, right? When it comes to PCI DSS, aside the PCI DSS person, or aside, PCI DSS being handed to one person or 2 people or a group or team, within PCI DSS as a framework or as a standard, there was nothing addressing roles and responsibilities. Now that has changed. Version 4 outlines roles and responsibilities, and it's in requirements 2 to requirement 11, right? It states who is supposed to do what, and people have, it assigns people to specific tasks. So that is nice. At least now we know that has to be, that has been formalized. Like if you want to look at it that way, it has been formalized. At first, we know people have to be in charge of stuff, but now it has been formalized in the standard, and that is also something that we are going to evaluate or audit you on. Okay, so that is one of the big changes. Now let's look at the timeline. When do we have to stay in compliance with PCI version 4.0, right? And this is also going to help organizations with strategizing or planning to meet PCI version 4.0, right? So Changing from version 3.2.1, at least without going really deep into it, we've seen like a couple of changes. And when we go deep, they are big, right? And we will address how you'll be able to strategize for such changes, right? So, but let's look at the timeline from PCI SSC. So, PCI DSS version 4, it was released in March 2021, and it is going to continue. It will go side by side with version 3.2.1 for 2 years, right? So if it was released in March 2021, we've spent, or it's almost been a year. I mean, almost 10 months, right? So in March this year, we would have, spent 1 year already with version 3.2.1 and version 4.0. Now, by March 31st of 2024, version 3.2.1 will be retired. So version 3.2.1 will not be in existence anymore. So if it is not in existence, then it means we cannot assess or we cannot do your audits with version 2.3.1. So it means that your organization will have to meet version 3.2, version 4, right? So if your organization, if their 12 months or their annual assessment falls, and it falls within the time before 2024, then before March 2024, then they can choose to still use 3.2.1 for their assessment, right? But anything after March of 31st March 2024, 3.2.1 would have been retired. So nobody will be using it anymore. Now everybody will have to, transition to 4.0. Now that means that from now till March of 2024, organizations have almost a year, give or take a year, like a year and some 3 months, right? That might seem a lot, but it really isn't, right? So if you don't have any strategy in place and you are addressing how you are going to adjust your operations and technology and everything to be able to meet version 4, you'll be, in deep waters, because organizations are currently even struggling with version 3.2.1. So switching totally to version 4, if you start early, is not going to be a significant life-changing event for the organization. But if you don't, then it's going to be a really big uphill battle for the organization. Okay. So now let's look at the diagram addressing the timelines. So this is from PCI SSC or the PCI Council, right? So the first quarter of 2022, they released version 4, right? And the second quarter was when they started training for QSAs and ISAs. And then, we are now going through still juggling between the two, right? Now, March 31st of March 2024 is when they are going to retire 3.2.1, like I said earlier. So it will be retired here. Now, from that time onwards, everybody will have to now stay in compliance with version 4. Now, what this is, new requirements. So let me address this real quick. There are some requirements in the new version, which is version 4, that are classified now as best practice, right? So you can choose to follow it or not, right? And I'm building up a case to address what is here, right? So in version 4.0, there are some requirements that now they are labeled as best practice. So an example, if probably your organization is supposed to implement, like your password should be, for an example, this is an example, it's not in the requirement, 16 characters, your password should be configured to be 16 characters on your enterprise system. Now it will be classified as best practice, right? So you can choose to do that or not. Now you have a grace period of from March 2024 all the way to March 2025, all those best practices or all those requirements that are labeled as best practices within the new version of the standard, which is version 4, all those best practices that you can choose to comply with or not, by 2025 they will become set in stone. So now you have to follow them. It's no more, we are not going to classify it no more as best practice, right? I hope that makes sense. So up to 2024, we are totally switching to version 4, right? March 2024, we are switching to version 4. Now from March 2024 to March 2025, all best practices or all requirements that were labeled as best practices in version 4, they will become actual requirements that you have to follow. Okay, so that is why they have this future dated new requirements become effective. That is what that means. Okay, so now organizations, they have from, we are in 2023 first quarter, they have from this first quarter to almost mid of first and second quarter next year to make sure that they are transitioning and switching to version 4. Now from this time all the way down to when version 3.2.1 will totally go away, organizations can choose to stay in compliance with version 4, right? Now, if you choose to try to stay in compliance with version 4 early, it will be better for your organization, but you have to be prepared for it, right? Because by the time, like the transition is fully in place, you'll already be in a better place, okay? So now let's move on. We've seen the timeline. Everybody is familiar with that now, and we know what is going on. We have almost a year and 3 months to transition. So now the question is, how do you prepare for version 4 transition? As an organization, how do you prepare, right? First, this is a list from Eretmis Inc. You have to hire a QSA, a certified version 4.0 QSA company to help guide you through the entire transition process, right? And reason being that the QSA companies, we've gone through the version 4 training. We know exactly what the changes are. We were part of it from the beginning when they were setting up version 4.0, right? So all the changes that were going back and forth, and we have a better understanding of it, right? Now, you can have somebody from your team, and PCI, they do a really good job. On their website, they have the change document where it is outline like the different changes between 3.2.1 and version 4, and they have all those documents, right? But to make sense of all of them and to be able to come up with a strategy is a lot of work, right? So, but if your team is up to it, but I'll still strongly suggest you partner with a QSA company to help you go through this transition process, right? And then 2, organizations, they have to have an established team, or they have to establish a team that is going to be in charge of this and focus mainly on the transition process, right? This is not something that you can just put to the side and assume things are going to work out down the line, right? Because it is not going to work out. And you don't want to be the first organization to go into version 4.0 and fail terribly, right? So you have to have a team in place that is going to help work with a QSA company to go through this change process, right? And your organization, you have to review and understand what the updates are. And if you have a QSA company, they can help you do that, or you can do that in-house as well, right? Now, there has to be, as part of how you'll be able to stay prepared, you have to conduct gap analysis. And what we mean by gap analysis, simply identifying where you are right now. So assuming you have passed or you are in compliance with 3.2.1. Now, if you are at 3.2.1, what is the difference, or like what is the gap between you and version 4? Like, what does your organization has to do, or what do they have to put in place to be able to move from passing version 3.2.1 to the point where they can pass version 4. So that is gap analysis. Now, if you get with a QSA company like Eretmis Inc., we'll be able to help you do that and give you like a really good strategy. So, and now the fifth thing that we'll look at is the organization has to develop a roadmap with timelines, right? So there has to be a roadmap identifying exactly things that you are going to do at what time, because like I said, 1 year seems like a long time, but it's really not, right? And especially if you know some of the things that has to be implemented on the technology side, people, processes side, you know it's a lot of work. And also based on the size of the organization and what the organization does, it can be a lot of work, right? So this should be a team within the organization, their full-time work from now till, you know, next year. And then also what I also say is, you know, my advice to all our clients is to start small. With this, there is always like a good place to start small. So an example, you can start with your policies, you know, and then build it up. But at least if you have everything that we just talked about in place, you'll be in a better place. But you can, you know, always start small and build it up, right? So that is how you can position yourself to transition. Now, how do you develop a strategic plan to transition into version 4, right? That is what we are going to look at. So with everything in cybersecurity or information security, we always look at it from the 3 main, you know, areas that affect security. That is people, processes, and technology. And you cannot approach this transition in any better way than to go down this route, right? So we will address the people aspect of, you know, what we are doing in terms of the transition, and then the processes, and then the technology. So technology, when it comes to cryptography and when it comes to encryption and all that, there are new requirements that we have to put in place. When it comes to authentication, multi-factor authentication is being stressed on now more in version 4. So we have to change some, you know, technologies that we have within the organization to be able to meet up with a whole list of technological changes that is coming. Now there are changes to processes as well. We have to also address that. And then people, one of the big changes is that roles and responsibilities have to be assigned, right? And there are other changes that are coming on the people side as well. So for us at Eretmis, this is our approach to coming up with a strategic plan for your transition, right? So, and then also, once we've looked at it from that way, we kind of integrate that with your strategic, tactical, and operational approach as well. Now we have only a year and some, you know, a year and 3 months. Strategic approach, normally we are looking at 5 years and beyond, right? Now we don't have that luxury, but we can still plan as if the 1 year was 5 years, right? Depending on how we are going to cut the year into, you know, different or smaller chunks, right? And the tactical, we are obviously addressing, you know, short range objectives and identifying like specific items that we have to hit to be able to, you know, get to our target. And operational, we are looking at work standards within the team, and then also like timelines and like the schedules. Your operational approach is going to take care of that. So for us, for our clients, we have our customized strategic plan that we give to our clients because there is no cookie cutter approach to this, right? Different organizations are different. They have different infrastructure setup. They have different organizational structure, right? They have different IT teams. They have different security maturity levels. So we have to take all that into consideration when we are planning and strategizing for moving to version 4.0. Okay, so this is not one fits all approach. So that is why your organization has to start early. So for us at Eretmis, our approach is that you have to start early, prioritize tasks and initiatives in a way that your organization will be able to take advantage of the transition timeline. So the transition timeline that we looked at, right? You don't have the luxury to follow it or not. You have to go by that timeline, right? Because once 3.2.1 is retired, that's it, right? There is no begging for more time to be able to stay in compliance with it, or, you know, like you have no reason, but just to follow 4.0, right? So that timeline is what everybody has to follow. So you have to start early. And then also you have to be able to come up with a cost-effective plan and approach to this, because this is going to impact the operations of the organization. So, every organization or every company has so much resources that everybody in the organization is pulling from. So if you don't plan well and you don't, you know, have a good partner who is going to help you strategize, you might probably spend more and get less, right? But you have to be able to come up with an effective plan that is going to minimize the impact when it comes to the operations of the organization, as well as, you know, time and resources and money that the organization has to conduct its operations. So this is the strategy and the approach that Eretmis, you know, has moving forward, and that is how we work with our clients to help position them well for the transition, right? So now we are going to address any questions that the group might have. And if your organization has to stay in compliance with PCI DSS, I mean, you can always reach out. We are here to help. So we offer like an initial free consultation for your organization. See where your organization is at right now, and how we'll be able to help you moving forward. And also, I mean, we are here to help, right? So our information is right there. Now we are going to leave the open the floor for questions. I know Brian had his hand up, and then we'll look at who else has the question. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Can you hear me, Dr. Du?
Yes, I can hear you.
Couple questions. When they say that the roles are specified now, and several people could be working in PCI, does that mean that organizations could hire more people to work in PCI and pay them less because they are defining roles now? That's the first question. And then the second question is, are you able to give an example of a control that someone could be using, and why would someone use a customized control instead of the defined control? Is it a better benefit for a customized control than it is a defined control? Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll tackle your last question first, and then we go to the first one. So your last question, customized approach and define. So let's say your organization is supposed the defined approach is to implement or configure your systems to use a password with at least minimum of 12 characters, right? Now, your company decides to use a system that allows you to use biometrics and then also a one-time PIN that is sent to your phone, right? So their system doesn't allow you to use passwords, but, you know, it's high-tech to that point where you are using biometrics and you are using like a one-time password, right? So in this situation, what they have is even better than using a password. So they can choose to use the customized approach, right, than, you know, using the defined approach. And mostly for organizations that would choose to go that route, it means they have something better, right? And they are more mature in their security posture. So that is an example of how you'll be able to use one or the other. Now, for every other organization that is still, you know, struggling with security, it behooves you to just stay with the defined approach, right? Because with the customized approach, you have to do extra. And even with what I just talked about, you still have to do your targeted risk analysis, and you have to, you know, come up with a whole other, you know, like documentation showing that what you have is better than not necessarily better than, but is meeting the intent, the original intent of the defined approach. And also with the defined roles is not telling organizations to hire or who to hire or anything like that, right? So defined roles, an example, within the organization, they have to have like defined roles. An example being, there's a system admin, right? Everybody know they have a system admin, but that wasn't addressed, previously. There's a network engineer, right? What is the network engineer supposed to do, right? There has to be your ASV scans, right? Who has to do those, right? So they are just defining things that we know already, not necessarily telling organizations to hire maybe 5 or 6 more PCI people, or it's not like addressing the organizational structure, right? But it's assigning tasks and responsibilities to, so it states that somebody has to be in charge of this. Somebody has to be in charge of that, right? Not necessarily defining who has to be. So it can be maybe Brian, who is a security analyst, who is still in charge of policies and in charge of like something else, right? So just like how in the previous requirements, it will state that you need to have a policy for ABCD, right? That doesn't mean they are limiting you to how many policies you're supposed to have in the organization. But for them, for that framework or for that standard, it requires you to have this policy addressing this specific issue. So that is part of the processes aspect of security. They've moved down to the people aspect as well, right? So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Eric will go ahead, and then Mr. Walker, and then Eliku.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Du. I have 2 questions. The first question is a continuation of Mr. Brian about the customized option. So if a company chooses to go for, let's say you have multiple points to complete, and then when you say customized option, does it mean, for example, if the company chooses to have a customized option for password, and then down for the points chooses to follow what the PCI 4.0 requests? I'm trying to understand, because you say if you choose to go for a customized option, that's it, or if you want to go what they are requesting, you have to go that route. That's my first question. The second question is about I'm trying to understand when you say now PCI 4.0 is going to be ongoing. I know for the previous, for example, if the auditor comes and then we pass, maybe there are a few mitigation to do, I do them, and then we meet again the following year. So I'm trying to understand now, during the year, when you say it's ongoing, what does it mean exactly? It means the auditor will come back, or am I going to report to the auditor? That's what I want to understand. Thank you.
Okay, so I will tackle your last question first, right? So look at it this way. Just like certifications that we have in cybersecurity and in IT, when there is a new version of the exam, the old version will go hand in hand with the new version for a time, mostly 6 months, and then they will drop the old version, right? So let's say like Security Plus, there's a new version of Security Plus. The old version is there. Now, when the new version of Security Plus, which was 6.01, came, and then 5.01 was still there, to get Security Plus certification, you can either choose to take the 5.01 exam or take the 6.01 exam, right? If you take any of those, you still have Security Plus certification. Now, until 5.01 is dropped and it has been like totally put aside or retired, you can take that exam or take this exam. So now for PCI DSS, your organization can choose to still stay in compliance with or use 3.2.1 for the assessment, and everything remains the same. or they can say, hey, we want to use 4.0 now. So that is what I mean. So you can choose to stay in compliance with 3.2.1 and forget about 4.0, or you can choose to stay in compliance with 4.0 and forget about 3.2.1.
And then what will happen after 2025?
Oh, no. So March 2024 is when we are going to retire 3.2.1. So after that, when 3.2.1 has been retired, 1st April 2024, everybody will have to stay in compliance with 4.0. Now there is only one requirement, which will be 4.0. Yes.
Thank you.
And also addressing the customized approach and the defined approach. So for the customized approach and the defined approach is not for all the requirements. Some requirements, you just have to do the customized approach. And when you go down the list of the requirements, it will show you which ones has the option for customized approach and which one doesn't, right? So if where PCI DSS, where PCI SSC deemed it fit that everybody has to follow this, there is no customized approach there, right? Where they think they are giving you that flexibility of using some other technology or something else that might even be better than what they are asking for in the defined approach, they will give you that option, right? So it's not all the requirements that will give you that customized approach option, right?
So this means that sometimes, let's say for there are 4 points to where I have that flexibility to choose, I can have some customized, some not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So if you are staying in compliance with 4.0, you can choose to do some defined approach and you can choose to do others customized approach. So it's not like if you choose customized. So what I meant by if you choose customized approach, you have to stick with it, or define, you have to stick with it, is for a specific requirement, not for the entire assessment that you are doing.
Great, thank you.
Yes, because you can maybe for requirement 1.2, you can try a customized approach, and when you fail, you are like, no, I want to do defined approach, right? So you have to, at that time, you have to choose one, right? Just like if you were using like defined approach and you failed, and you are like, I want to do customized approach instead of implementing compensating controls, right? But when we get in that area, then we are going too technical. So let's just keep it at the surface. Okay. Mr. Walker, please go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Adu, I believe you answered one of my questions. I asked anyway. For those of us who's looking to take our PCI certification, do we take the do we study for the 3.2.1 or the 4.0? And what are the disadvantages of the 4.0 in your professional opinion?
So if you want to take the PCIP, study 3.2.1 now. For anybody who wants to get into PCI, become a PCI anything, from now till next year, I will first study 3.2.1, have a better understanding of it, because like the change is not huge, right? So if you understand it, it's very easy to add on and switch to 4.0. Now, if you just jump straight into 4.0 and you didn't know what was happening in 3.2.1, I mean, it is new, so you are, like studying everything from scratch, but you don't have like a point of reference, right? And it's like you are very new, you are just studying it, but which is also not a bad thing, right? But if you have the opportunity to look at this one and then have a look at the new one too, I think that will give you like a better understanding and perspective of where PCI is going, right? And so disadvantages of 4.0, I think, frankly, for me, the customized approach, I think not many people or many organizations are going to use it. I think they should just go the traditional way, define them. If you don't meet it, you put in place a compensating control, right? Because like the customized approach, they are starting it now, so they don't, really, it has not really been in practice, so they don't know how much issues and problems that will come up with, right? And it's more work for the organization, it's more work for the assessor or the auditor, right? And there's a very, there are a lot of too many gray areas there. So frankly, in my professional opinion, I think they should have just stuck with the, with a defined approach for the entire assessment, and the customized approach could have been something nice to try, right? Or an extra bonus something, right? So that is my professional opinion. Elikum, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Adu. I actually, one of my questions was answered. I was trying to find out if a company could combine aspects of defined approach and customized approach. I think you did answer that one, and you said, yeah, for, depending on the requirement, they could either go, if authorized, I guess, they could go with customized, and they could also like do a mix.
Go with
match.
defined, yes.
Yes. So I'm just curious now, when let's say a company decides they want to do the customized approach, are they going to submit some, like a criteria of what, for the QSA to understand what they're going to have? Do they have to submit that before the QSA shows up, or the QSA will figure out once they arrive at the company to do the assessment? I don't know if that's a question you can answer now, but I'd like to know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, there are documentations that you have to fill out if you are doing the customized approach. And that document also outlines what they are looking for, what PCI SSC is looking for you to be able to do the customized approach. And then you also have to do your targeted risk assessment as well, right? And all that you're going to give to the QSA for them to look at it before they come and do your assessments. And so you are actually right. That is how that is going to go. So although, like I was saying, the reason why I was saying there are some gray areas is that this is new, it's being used, and most of it is going to be based on the judgment of the QSA. I mean, the entire assessment is based on the professional judgment of the QSA anyways. But I think the defined approach makes it a bit rigid, right? They are trying to introduce flexibility. That is why they have the customized approach. But I mean, I'm not opposed to change. Let's see how that goes, right? But you are right. There are documentations for that they have to fill out, and so for whatever customized approach that you are using, you have to do a risk assessment on it, and they've given you the blueprints to do that. So great question. Laundry, please go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Adu. Hello, everybody. I was curious to find out, you mentioned in the presentation that the company, if I understood that correctly, is a requirement now for the company to have people assign staff members to different responsibility in the process of getting compliance to the PCI 4.0 version. And if the company has these people assign different responsibility, and you mentioned that the PCI website has the information for them to follow what needs to be done. If the company is able to have these people and these people have access to this website to be able to look at it and follow the instruction from the website, what will be the need for the company to still hire the QSA to be in charge of, I want to say, monitoring or supervising the activity of the staff members who are who are in charge of making the company compliant?
Okay, so I think your question has two parts to it. So what I was saying was that when you go to the PCI's website, it has documents for you to be able to go through and see what are the changes between version 3.2.1 and version 4, right? Like that was what I was saying. Now with the new add-on, which is assign roles and responsibilities, that is not going to be on the website. So like the website is not going to tell you who has to do what, right? That is in the requirements, right? Now in the requirements, it is only going to, so an example, this is not in the requirement, but an example, if it states that you have to assign a system admin, right? Or you have to assign somebody in charge of your policies. That is just it. The same person who is system admin can be in charge of your policies, can be in charge of other things, right? So just like when the requirement states that you have to have a password policy, you just have to have the policy to show as evidence to the QSA doing the assessment that, hey, I have it, and then they are going to check you off, right? So every organization has a list of members with roles and responsibilities anyways, because that is why anybody on here who has been working in security for a while, we do like review of assets. So assets review, where quarterly you go through, hey, John is still on here. John has been given this access to, is he still holding that title? Is he, you know, in that role? So previously that wasn't part of the assessment. We didn't go down the list of, okay, who is assigned to what. But now organizations have that already. So that is not going to make any change to who the organization is going to employ for what. That is not what the like PCI is trying to tell you to do, right? It is just like how it was asking for, let me see your policy for this, let me see your policy for that. So this can simply be, okay, so let me see like your list of, instead of your list of assets, which you are going to show anyways, a list of people and their roles and responsibilities, right? So that is not going to change. Now for QSAs, QSAs are not necessarily the people who are coming into your organization to supervise your staff to make sure they are doing everything right. QSA is coming to do an audit. So they are going to come with their PCI DSS, whichever version, and they are going to use that to conduct an audit or an assessment on your infrastructure. And when you pass, they will sign you off and say, give you a ROC and attestation of compliance. And you can show that to your Akara and to the card brands that you are in compliance, right? So, but you can also hire a QSA company, which is going to be your PCI partner that will help you throughout the PCI journey, you know, treating PCI as business as usual. And as one of the goals for the new version, you know, PCI should be a continuous process. So you can hire a QSA company that is going to be a consultant helping you alongside with that. But then also, mind you, that PCI company can be the that QSA company can be the QSA company who will be doing your assessment when you are due for an assessment, because that will be conflict of interest, right?
Understood. Thank
yes.
you.
So hopefully that, you know, answered all your questions. Brian, and then
yes.
So we'll go, and then Randall. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Real quick, not to get too technical, as you said before, when does an organization have the right to exercise that compensation control? Is it before the QSA comes and does an audit, or during the audit, or after an audit? When are they allowed to exercise that compensation control?
Okay, so I hope we are not confusing compensating control with the customized approach. You are talking about compensating control, right?
Yeah. The one that if they didn't do something, they can use a compensation setting controls.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes, correct.
Okay. So compensating controls, you have to have them in place before an assessment.
Okay.
So this is how like compensating controls work. So if you know in advance that you have some shortcomings in terms of real business excuse for not being able to meet the original defined approach, you know, so an example, if your organization has to maybe use the most like the most secured encryption algorithm, which may be an example if they have to use AES, right? But then you are using a very old, or what we will call legacy system. So the legacy system does not support the use of AES or maybe TLS, right? So there is no way you'll be able to meet that. And that legacy system, you cannot also change it because everything that you do hinges on that particular system, right? So if you change it, or if the organization wants to switch to a newer version of that system, is probably going to take a month. And if you are an organization like Amazon, even 1 minute that you are offline, you lose millions, right? So in that instance, you have a business justification why you cannot meet the original intent of using AES or the most secure encryption algorithm. So in this situation, you know that in advance. So you have to put in place a compensating control, because the intent of you using the very secure encryption algorithm is to protect hardware data that goes through that area of your network, right? So if you can use that, then you have to put in other measures that will still help you to protect hardware data that goes around that area of your network, right? So when I come in to do an assessment and we get to that point, you are like, hey, we couldn't meet it because we have a business justification, and the business justification has to be in writing. So it has to be in writing, signed by somebody, top management, and I'll look at it and assess it. Okay, yeah, okay, it's true. So now what other measures do you have in place to meet the original intent of the defined approach for that specific requirement, right? So that is what we call like the additional or the extra controls you put in place is what we call compensating controls. So you are compensating for not meeting the original intent, right? So it has to be in place before. I don't have to come and tell you, hey, you failed this, and you are like, oh, you know what, I'm going to go the route of compensating controls. Then it doesn't work that way. If you fail, then you have to, put in remediation measures to pass the original intent. But if you knew in advance you couldn't meet it and you have a business justification, then you have to put in place compensating controls before we even do an assessment. Okay, so I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so please go ahead. Suleiman, yes.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Dr. Edu. I just want to thank you for the training and thank you for all the significant information you just provided. I have a question. Like you were saying earlier that cloud computing concept has been addressed in version 4. What does that mean? Is that mean as a PCI DSS specialist, do we have to learn cloud computing or cloud security, or what is that about exactly?
Oh, okay. So an example with PCI requirement 1 was addressing firewalls. It stated that you're supposed to have firewalls and routers in place on your network, right? And the intent of that is to protect your network. Now, we all know in this day and age, we don't use only firewalls and routers to protect your network. So as part of that change, now the new requirement says that you have to put in place like security devices and systems to protect your network. So they kind of make it generalized, because it's not only, if we say only firewall and routers, now we are leaving out everything else. But at the time when the old requirement was made, that was, the best thing in terms of security, right? So those are some of the changes. Now, when we talk about cloud, the whole setup of 3.2.1 wasn't necessarily addressing cloud, right? So that doesn't mean if you want to be a PCI specialist, you have to be a cloud guru, but at least you have to know some cloud security. And security, if you understand security, if you switch to the cloud, it's not a big change. It's the same way you protect your normal network. Is the same way you are going to protect the cloud, right? You just have to know some few cloud things here and there, but it's not a huge change. So that is what I meant. So now it is more cloud friendly, addressing some of the issues that we might encounter in the cloud. But when 3.2.1 was made, cloud wasn't the thing of the day, right? So that is what I meant.
Okay, thank you.
Randall, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Adu. I'll try to frame this question. I'll try to quantitatively, if you will, size it up, but because it can be all over the map. So what I'm wondering is, say there's a company and they're switching from 3.2.1 to 4.0, and say the time remaining, to be approved for 4.0 is soon approaching, if you will. I'm trying to estimate how much time might they, I'll say buffer to get a QSA in there for an audit, if you will. So say if their complexity level is medium and say their risk surface is medium, I'll say, roughly how much time should they anticipate this initial audit to take in, say, a number of days or weeks, or what are we talking about, months? Any like rule of thumb, if you will?
Oh, good question. So on average, most assessments will take roughly on average around like 3 months, right? Depending on who is doing the assessment, I can do some in 2 and less, depending on how much work you are putting in and how much time you are spending on your making your ROC and other documentation and assessing other documentation. But for 4.0, first off, you as a company, you are now, like, that is the first time that you are going through 4.0. Mind you, the QSA company, if they've not done 4.0 for somebody else before, for them, this is also the first time. So it might take a bit longer, right? So I'll give myself maybe 4 months, right? Because everybody's new to this, even PCI themselves, they are the ones who brought it up, but they are new. They don't know. I mean, they have everything set up, ready to go. But as to how quick we can go through it and, all that, and also plus with the customized approach aspect to it, it also brings a different twist, that needs time for you to assess and make sure, whatever they have is really, it really does make sense and it's going to help protect their systems, right? So I'll say a good 4 months is going to be a good rule of thumb.
I see. Okay. But we better plan on 6 months to be on the safe side, because there's such a pre-audit, I would imagine, and then the real audit. Is that fair?
Yes. So give yourself ample time. Joshua and then George. Go ahead, Joshua.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, normally with regulatory compliance, so with PCI, it's card data, but the main thing is guarding. So essentially making sure like a customer puts in their credit card data, they cannot retrieve that credit card data. And then to make sure that the employees don't have access to anything they don't have to have access to. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I started doing PCI compliance before there was even a PCI compliance. It was just called like PII protection. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that as these, like I was looking at something where it has now like below 15 million transactions or 15,000 and above 15 million or 15,000 transactions, and that's the different levels of PCI. So one question is, does 4.0 have anything to do with that as well? Because I've been out of the industry for a bit, and I was looking at that because that's something that I usually dealt with pretty often. Do the number of transactions matter as far as the PCI compliance level? And then again, with like compensating controls and stuff, it was like, obviously you have your firewalls and that, you know, like port 80 and port 443 or whatever, right? So you don't process credit card transactions on port 80 because it's not encrypted. And then you have like SHA-1, SHA-256. Everyone should probably be on SHA-256. And then there's like, usually you have like a dev, like let's say you have a specific piece of software. It'll usually have like either a setting or a set of configurations that you need to change to go from dev staging testing to PCI compliant. And then you run your scanners. So then when you come in for an audit, like how extensive is that audit? Is it a 4-hour day, a 6-hour day, an 8-hour day? And then what exactly, you know, are you looking for as far as what's compliant and what isn't, as far as data compartmentalization and you know, like say for the employee interface, like they need to have a, you know, like maybe they need to put in a technical support number to actually pull up a card data. Do you look like, how extensive is the audit?
So audits can be expensive. I've seen companies, some big companies that can do audits for $1 million plus, right? I mean, Eretmis, we don't do audits in those ranges because that entails a lot, and that is mostly for huge companies like companies with maybe more than 10 outlets. So audits, they can be expensive. For, I'll say like an average, simple, very easy audit, it will cost you a good plus, a good maybe 50 plus upwards, right? But depending on the complexity, depending on what the organization has going on, depending on how organized the organization is, and how mature they are in security, that will also determine how much they are going to pay, right? So an organization that has everything in place, that is very mature, they have everything set up, it's going to take less time. So, and also for the auditor who is doing the audit, you're asking about hours. I'll still go back to depending on how well organized and how well structured they are. When you are doing on-site audits, you have to be there as a QSA, you have to be on site to look at evidence and to interview people as well. So for hours, it's going to take you a good 8 hours, you know, every day for maybe at least the next week or two, depending on how many people you have to talk to and what you have to see, right? So, and then once you're done with, you know, being there in person, talking to them, that is not it. Now you have to come back and, you know, like revise your notes and do your work and attestation of like compliance and revisit things that they didn't have. And also if they miss certain things and they have to do remediation, you have to also wait and go and check on remediation and make sure they are meeting the requirements. Right now, also moving back to your first question, which was about like the levels of compliance, the levels of validation, right? Yes, based on the number of card transactions, will determine the level that you are at. So we have level 1 to 4. That hasn't changed in the version 4. It's still the same. Based on the level, the number of transactions per year will determine where the organization is at in terms of levels. Now, for level 1, they are the ones who require a QSA to come on site to do the assessment. Level 2 to 4, they do what we call self-assessment. So it's a questionnaire that they fill out, and then they will send that to their acquirer. But still with that, they can still have a QSA company help them out, or they can have somebody who knows PCI help them out do that. But mostly for on-site assessment or audits, is level 1 merchants and service providers who have to undergo that. Now,
okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt because I was on the self-assessment questionnaire. Mm-hmm. So, and usually a lot of the things you explain, like if you're not just going to give someone the system admin password and let them peruse through your system. So you got a sysadmin, you got a developer, got to allocate time. So these are all level 1 where, you know, they would be available for interview and, like you said, assessment, and then remediation, and then follow-up interview. So then I guess so for level 2 and up on self-questionnaire, is there still, if I fill out the questionnaire and I run the scans and then there's some issues, is there an auditor that I want to talk to, or is that going to also go towards like a peer review group as to what specific issues that I think I may have with the system related to data privacy?
Oh, so with level 2 and 3, they can still have, they can still talk to a QSA company, right? If they need any help understanding like what is going on. But a QSA is not necessarily coming to do like a level 1 assessment. But some level 2 companies and 3 companies who want to be on the good side of security, although they don't have to undergo on-site assessments, they still do, right? To show that they went above and beyond, and you know, like they are top when it comes to security in their industry. So you can always, even if you are level 4, you can always reach out to a QSA company to help you out, right? And I think that every company that has to stay in compliance has to have a QSA partner, you know, like a QSA company as a partner, right? Because even with the self-assessment, if you are taking security seriously, I think you have to get somebody who knows what is going on to help you with it, right?
I still had to have a third party, and they had to have certain, it was a very high level certification for their data center. I think it was Sarbanes-Oxley certified data center, and then they had to scan any internet facing payment gateways. And then I had to, if they found any vulnerabilities, then on the server or the gateway or the APIs or data processor I was using, I had to remediate those, and then fill out the remediation steps that I took and have them run another scan.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you are on the right path. So, all right, George, go ahead. Thank you for the question.
So my question is about when you use the customized approach, are you supposed to, report that, you're using a customized approach, or do you just go ahead and use it?
So when I come for an audit, right, you let me know that maybe on version 3.2, on requirement 3.2 or on requirement 4, we are using the customized approach, and you give me the documentation to that effect, right? So if when I'm going down my list and checking stuff and interviewing and whatnot, like when I get there, I know we are not using the defined approach, we are using the customized approach. So you don't need a permission from anybody. You can just go ahead and use it, but make sure all the documentation and stuff you need, has been filled out, and you are doing it accordingly, as stated by PCI, the PCI DSS version 4.0.
Okay, so so you can, if like in between like audits, you can decide to either change to a different thing, which might not be up to the standard that you need, but no one is going to know until the next audit.
I don't really get your question.
So let's say you have you just had an audit completed, and you decided to revamp your system, and during the revamp, you went with a customized approach in place of what you had on your audit, which you already passed, right?
Yes.
No one is going to know whether what you did is adequate until the next audit.
Okay, good question. So this is when you need, I'm stating it out for everybody to, if you are not aware of it. So every organization has to, if you have to go through PCI compliance, every 12 months, you have to, undergo an audit, or you have to do a self-assessment. Now, from the time you pass your last audit or did your last self-assessment, till the time you have to do your next, assessment annually, if there are any significant changes on your network or on your infrastructure, that, touches on cardholder data, you have to do a new audit. So let's say you just passed your assessment a month ago, right? And you had a big revamp where you change all your POS systems, all the servers that are, that touches cardholder data. Guess what? You have to do another audit once you're once you have done with setting up and revamping your systems. You have to bring back a QSA company to do the audit for you. I hope that answers your question, George.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Mr. Walker, go ahead, and then Brian will go, and we will stop for now, and we'll continue some other day.
Yes, Dr. Du, quick question. Zero trust segmentation isn't anything new. Is that an example of the customized approach a company or organization can implement, or is that a defined approach?
So with customized, depending on what specific requirements you are talking about. But if you are talking about zero trust as a framework that we have to follow, PCI version 4 doesn't necessarily call out zero trust, but most of the things it is calling out kind of borders on zero trust, right? And for everybody who is not familiar with zero trust, you have to look it up. So zero trust, the underlying factor with zero trust is back in the day, right? Security was looked at in this way. So anything that was on our network was deemed to be good. Anything that was outside our network was deemed to be bad, right? But we've come to find out over the years that is not the case. There can be something within our network that is bad. So even though we've authenticated people onto our network, we've authorized them onto the network, that doesn't necessarily mean everybody on the network is good. So zero trust seeks to reverse this and turn it on its head. So zero trust states that now anything that is outside or inside can be bad. So you have to actively seek permission, even if you're on the network, to move from one point to the other on the network. So that is the idea behind zero trust, right? Now NIST has come up with a formal framework for zero trust. I think it's NIST special publication 800-207. I'm really good with numbers, but don't quote me on that. But find NIST zero trust, and if you Google it, it's going to come up. But I'm pretty sure it's 800-207. Right. So that is the number for that publication. And that is a very simplified way of what zero trust is. So with PCI version 4, it doesn't necessarily call out zero trust, but then everything that is being pushed out in terms of the requirements, borders on zero trust. So, and for coming back to your question, so with a customized approach, you choose to really implement whatever you think is going to meet that is even better than the required approach, the defined approach, right? So you are not restricted to anything. You can, do anything that is good security, that is even better than what they are asking for in the defined approach. So if you are implementing some different technology that borders or that will help with zero trust, that is fine. You just have to be able to defend whatever you are putting in place, right? In terms of the documentation that is required and the reasons you are given and the risk assessment you've done, right? So if you meet all that, then that is fine, you are good. Brian, please go ahead.
Yes, the PCI Council, they do a updated version every couple of years, and just wanted to know if there was ever a situation where hackers were able to find out a way to break several controls, and it infected a lot of companies where they were losing millions. Would PCI put in emergency control or try to figure out emergency control instead of waiting years to put that control in place?
So a quick answer to that, Brian. So for all breaches, all data breaches that bordered on PCI, right? So breaches that attackers stole credit card and debit card information, during the investigation, for every breach on those lines, there is an investigation, a PCI investigation. Now, there has not been a single incident whereby when the investigation was conducted, the company that got breached was in total compliance with PCI DSS, regardless whether it was version 1.1, version 1.2, or version 3.2.1, right? So it is not the framework that has to be changed. It's the practices of the organization that has to be improved upon, right? So if you get breached, it's not a certain requirement that wasn't strong enough, because all the PCI requirements, most of them overlap, right? So one will help you cover the other. So that way, if one aspect doesn't catch the issue, the other, underlying nets, which might be another requirement, might catch it. So when they change the requirements, they are changing it to keep up with technological advancements, right? And to keep up with, threats, the threat landscape. But within, when it comes to principles in or best practices in security, they don't really change that much, right? They don't really change that much. So regardless if maybe our password length is supposed to be 7 or 12 or 14 or 16, you still have to keep your password a secret. You still have to keep your password, safe, right? You don't have to write it on a sticky note and, post it on your workstation. So, but all those are best practices that regardless of the configuration that we put in place, if we are following, all these best practices and everything else that is stated, you should be able to be off the radar of attackers for a while, right? So breaches are not what really triggers a change in any framework or in any standard. The standard, they have to, keep up with technological advancement and the threat landscape to address all these issues. Now, 3.2.1, we can still implement that, and we are still going to be safe. But then 4.0 addresses more technological advanced ways that we can improve our security, right? So I hope that answers your question, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for the class tonight. Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. And let's see if there are any questions in the chat, and then we are going to call it a night. Okay, somebody's asking for the recording. It will be posted. It will be sent to everybody. Okay. All right. I appreciate everybody's time. PCI version 4, this is not the last of it. We will meet again and talk about it and go more in depth, tackle different aspects of it as we move forward. But in your organizations, if you have to stay in compliance with PCI, make sure, you are following everything that you have to do, at least what we laid out in terms of strategy and how to strategize for version 4. You are following it, and Eretmis is always open to partner with your company to help your company stay in compliance. So I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Stay safe. We will meet again later down the line. I think tomorrow we are having cyber chat. So also stay tuned. We are going to send out the links for that as well. I appreciate everybody's time. Have a blessed rest of the evening, and we will meet again.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Du.
you.
Good
Good
evening.
night.
Dr. Du. Yeah.
Awesome.